I want to first thank you for taking some time this evening to join me. My name is Congresswoman Ana Lilia Mejia, and I have the honor and the privilege to represent New Jersey's 11th Congressional District. I am hosting this call today. The need for this call really was driven by concerned citizens that I've encountered across New Jersey's 11th Congressional District, folks who have asked for insight as to what's happening at Delaney Hall. What are the legal implications for every American? Why are we so focused on, and why do you continue to hear about the medically vulnerable? And what impact is it having at the local level, at the municipal level? So I organized this call to make sure that you had access to this information. Joining us tonight are a set of leaders, of thought leaders who are well-versed on not only what's happening at Delaney Hall, happening locally, the legal implications, et cetera. I'm joined tonight with by the executive director of the ACLU, Amol Sinha, who has been leading New Jersey's ACLU for many, many years, is well-versed on what's not only happening at Delaney Hall, but happening on immigration issues across the board, and is going to give us some insight that everyone convened tonight should understand. Joining us also is Jorge Torres from Endelan. He's the Eastern Region Coordinator for the National Day Laborers Organization Network. They have been on the ground and connected to impacted families across the country, but specifically at Delaney Hall. Also joining us is the director of Make the Road New Jersey, Nedia Morsy, who also is connected to across communities and can give us insight on not only what we need to understand, but what actions we may take. And then, of course, I'm joined by the Honorable Sheena Collum, Mayor of South Orange, New Jersey, and the Honorable Mayor Frank Velez, Mayor of Belleville, New Jersey, two communities who have been impacted by increased ICE activity and the consequences of having our friends and neighbors essentially abducted from their communities. So I want to jump right in. We have a lot to talk about, and I'm going to jump first to you, Amol. First, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Your insight has been honestly very, very useful to me as I start to lead from this position and to advocate on behalf of all communities in New Jersey's 11th Congressional District. Could you give us a little bit of an insight, give us a primer, give us a level set? What do everyday New Jerseyans, what do everyday Americans need to understand about what's happening on our immigration system, and what is happening at Delaney Hall, and why it should matter to everyone, irrespective of your immigration status? I don't know if someone from the team can pin Amol, but that would be fantastic if we could hand it to you.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. And thank you for being a leader and a champion on this issue and so many other issues. I want to zoom out for a second and just talk about the Trump administration writ large and what we've been seeing from day one of this administration. And really predating that, including in the first Trump term and during the campaign, he had made attacking immigrants a centerpiece of why he should be elected. And so on day one, of course, we saw him try to attack birthright citizenship, a law that a principle and a constitutional right that has been the law of the land for over 150 years. And he tried to undo it. And of course, the Supreme Court gave him a smackdown on that. And we at the ACLU, the second he announced that he was going to sign this executive order, we sued him within 2 hours. And over the course of many months, went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Our National Legal Director, Cecilia Wong, argued that case. And in late June, we heard that the Supreme Court established once again that birthright citizenship is the law of the land. And then, there were a number of other things. He was targeting people and using the immigration laws of our country to target people for their speech. That includes people like our client Mahmoud Khalil, and so many others like him who were threatened and continue to be threatened with detention and deportation for the ideas that they are espousing, not for any criminal allegations or anything that suggests that that they should be actually deported. And so we are seeing, over and over this administration go after immigrants who are politically vulnerable and are people that are already are already marginalized in our society, and this administration is trying to take advantage of that to score cheap political points. And so what we're seeing is, the attacks on immigrants as a result of many years of hate mongering from this administration. It includes, not just attacking individuals, but attacking systems as well. And for a long time in this country, we've been able to rely on temporary protected status as something that people can utilize in order to be in a country that protects them from things that may be going wrong in their homelands. And so temporary protected status has been something that many people from many different countries have been able to use. And of course, this administration has gone after the most vulnerable among us, people who have sought out temporary protected status. And of course, the Supreme Court recently said that Haitians and Syrians, hundreds of thousands of people, will no longer be eligible for TPS in this country. It also includes the attempts by this administration to undermine deferred action for childhood arrivals, right? DACA, and so we've seen immense delays in processing DACA applications for people who came here when they were children and have built lives here. And these are individuals and families who have U.S. citizen children themselves, who are part of their communities, who are contributing economically to their communities, and we've also seen the immigration detention system in this country expand exponentially, and the administration, Stephen Miller in particular, has said explicitly that he wants to detain hundreds of thousands of people. He wants to detain 3,000 people a day. Every single day I wake up to a number of texts from individuals telling me about ICE in their communities. Every single day I read about stories of brutal arrests that are happening all across the country. We're fighting back every way we can. But I wanted to talk for a minute specifically about Delaney Hall and what's going on there. If folks have heard in the news, Delaney Hall is yet another symptom of the Trump administration's mass deportation and detention machine. Delaney Hall is a facility in Newark that reopened as an immigration detention facility in 2025, soon after the second Trump administration took office. And it quickly became the largest immigration detention facility on the East Coast. And in a lot of ways, New Jersey, as a result, has become sort of the staging ground for the Trump administration's war on immigrants. And we've seen that in many different ways, including the fact that Delaney Hall opened and immigration detention is expanding in New Jersey, including the fact that there's this back and forth about whether or not the warehouse facility in Roxbury should be used as an immigration detention facility. There's also been conversations about Fort Dix being used as an immigration detention facility. Elizabeth detention facility has been here. There's also been there's been there have been attacks on the rule of law and on the branches of government, as we've seen with the arrest of Congresswoman LaMonica McIver and Ras Baraka. Congresswoman McIver is still being prosecuted by this administration. That's all a part of the systems that the administration is trying to attack as a result. But by doing so, by weaponizing immigration in many different respects. It's never been about immigrants or immigration per se. It's been about power and abuse of power and ensuring that the Trump administration and President Trump gets away with as much as he can as short of a time span as possible. And so when we hear about Delaney Hall, we're hearing about people that are being treated inhumanely. We're hearing about deplorable conditions. We're hearing about unsanitary conditions, abuse and violence by people who are guarding the facility. We're hearing also from people about inedible food. And of course, perhaps most egregiously, we're hearing about lack of access to medical care and outright medical neglect. So much so that now we know about 3 people that have died at Delaney Hall in the past year. And it's horrifying. I mean, many of us have talked to family members of loved ones who are inside. We've talked to people who are inside or have been recently detained. I've heard of stories of people who complained about medical issues. There's one guy that I still remember who told me that he was experiencing severe abdominal pain after he ate the food at Delaney, and he wasn't able to see a doctor. When he went to a guard to ask for a doctor, the guard said that he only spoke English and therefore couldn't advise whether or not he should see a doctor. It took 7 days for the guy to see a doctor. In the meantime, he was granted release from Delaney Hall, and he left Delaney Hall still in severe pain. And he ended up going to the hospital where he realized he needed surgery for a serious GI condition that he developed while he was detained. And this guy's 36 years old, and he didn't have this condition beforehand, and it took just a couple of weeks at Delaney Hall for him to develop something that could have been life-threatening. And so we're seeing this repeatedly over and over, and the cruelty is the point, the inhumanity is the point. And then you have people who have been talking about Delaney Hall and the reports coming out of it as though it's some false narrative, that every single person who's complaining or who's reporting inhumane conditions or inedible food or medical neglect is lying, and that the members of Congress that have gone and witnessed with their own eyes the neglect and talked to people and have heard stories about this neglect, that they are a part of this grand narrative. The Trump administration has sold us all a big lie, which is that they have gone after the worst of the worst, that they are trying to rid this country of criminals. But the reality is 90% of the people that are detained at Delaney have no criminal record whatsoever. 70% of them have no charges against them. And so it is really an example of what's going on all across the country. The Trump administration continues to lie about who it is that they're going after. They're going after people indiscriminately. They're separating families, and they're making sure that people are constantly living in fear and being erased from American society. So if you care about the rule of law, if you care about democracy, if you care about the Constitution, including due process and equal protection under the law, you should care about what's happening in these immigration facilities all across the country, including right here in New Jersey at Delaney Hall. Because once it happens in one community, to one group, to one set of individuals, we're all at risk because the precedent has been set. If we allow them an inch, they will take it and go run a mile. And unfortunately, with many people that are surrounding the Trump administration right now, including in other branches of government, we are seeing a lot of folks neglecting their job to hold the executive accountable. And we need to step up and make sure that every single person, that includes everyday people who are living in New Jersey in communities whose neighbors are immigrants who are being torn apart from their communities, that we all speak up and speak out and make sure that we're doing whatever we can to hold ICE and this administration accountable. I'll pause there, but I'm happy to answer any questions, Congresswoman.
Let me go off mute. First of all, thank you, Amol. Folks need to understand. First of all, Amol Singh has led the New Jersey ACLU since 2017. His work under his leadership, he's led the ACLU in fighting, in securing victories around criminal justice reform, immigration reform, voting rights, free speech. Before he came to New Jersey, he worked in New York Civil Liberties Union, as well as was a policy fellow at Princeton University School of Public and International Affairs. I'm kind of reading your CV because I'm letting folks know that your broad experience in voting rights, immigration law, criminal justice reform is so thorough that your insight is actually should be taken with the kind of gravitas that it in fact deserves. I want to thank you for that. I'm going to hand it to, and I'm sure I'm going to come back to you in a moment, but I'm going to hand it to Jorge Torres. Now, Jorge is, as I said, is the Eastern coordinator, I believe, Eastern coordinator for NDLAN, the National Day Laborers national organization. This organization across the country has been working closely with families. And at Delaney Hall, Jorge is often at the forefront of the struggle at Delaney Hall to ensure that families are getting the support that they need, that the medically vulnerable, their stories are being heard across not only New Jersey, but to those who can have impact, including myself. And so, Jorge, I'm going to hand it to you. You know, you and I have spoken a lot about the conditions at Delaney Hall. You've introduced me to impacted families, including the families of Mr. Edwin Cornejo, who sadly lost his life a couple weeks ago at Delaney Hall. I want to hand it to you, Jorge, and paint a picture. Bring us to Delaney Hall. Give us a sense of what we are hearing, we're learning from families is happening on a daily basis.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to start to saying that it's not just me, it's not just Endelon, it's a collective of groups, of organizations, of grassroots organizations that are part of the Eyes Out of New Jersey campaign. That together we organize for local and state wide laws to get ICE out of New Jersey, which includes the efforts of end the contracts for detention centers, the collaborations between local police and ICE, which is we call it La Pola Migra. And also we aim it to limit the federal agents' access to the state-owned property through popular education and rapid response. The Delaney whole issue has been there for many years. It has not just started with this current administration. But the most important things, the most important thing I want to mention, and I want to give it all to the strikers that start this a hunger strike back in Maine. And one of them actually is still in detention. One of the leaders, Martin Soto, is still in detention. He was transferred to Elizabeth Detention Center, and he's been holding there, waiting for his immigration procedures, and he's still being holding there with an inhumane conditions, like Marol was mentioned, and you all of us have heard about the food condition, food quality. It is terrible, is inhumane. The lack of basic hygiene products is one of the examples. Sometimes they don't even have toilet paper; they have to pay for it. Water costs like around $8, and they only work for 2 hours. It was not just a hunger strike; it was also a labor strike that they start, and the organizing outside and the upraising outside of it is it was what it calls the public attention and national attention, and so on media. And I think I would like to give that honor to the hunger strike. But what happened inside is basically people with diabetes without their medications, people with appendicitis, no medication, high blood pressure. We had a case of a Pedro, who is Maribel's dad, who I'm gonna share a video how we were able to free him, and working together with in many different levels, and how we were able to free him. But he didn't have the medication that he needs for his tooth infection, a simple pill. And Edwin lost his life because he didn't have a pill for his high blood pressure. I think those are the conditions that are constantly here, that are constantly there in Delaney Hall, and not just in this detention center, but across the country. Currently, it is another pregnant woman that is still not getting the proper medical attention. And I think this is just inhumane, and we need to call it out. Something that is happening currently too is that it is a huge drop of staff, which just makes worse. A lot of people is quitting their jobs, which is good and somehow, but is making the conditions inside worse. The dentist quit his job inside of the detention center, and that makes just the medical conditions even worse. Transfers, inhumane transfers all the time on the daily basis. We see bands all the time, back and forth, and leaving the Delaney Hall, especially at nights. Transfers people that comes from New York, New Jersey, but also when they don't, with cases doesn't have habeas, they are being transferred, so they can keep more time in detention. Some of the sufferings that families are encountering are the lack of access to free legal counsel, and that lead us to have a lot of scams, lawyers that has taken advantage of our families. They are charging tremendous amount of money to just charge for one case. Um, and we really are worried about this, and we wanted to call the attention on lawyers as scams. Families are also suffering psychological impact. I think the psychological impact is very crucial, more such as a financial impact as well, and emotional impact. That is something that we need to pay attention as well. And I wanted just to mention some of the cases. I still have a little bit of time, but we have and how we were able to make these cases public in order to bring also attention to this issue. Like I mentioned, Martin Soto is just waiting for the Attorney General to sign his visa, so he can be free. And his wife got, he was arrested when he was going to buy diapers, and his wife suffered a miscarriage of his baby, unfortunately, and she's been also organizing and very vocal. Edwin case, as you already mentioned, he passed away on June 31st, and he collapsed after he didn't have his pills. And still, Gio and I are not telling the truth about his death. And I think the way that we've been supporting the families with mutual aid, with your office, with Congress Menendez as well, I think that's the way we need to keep supporting this type of cases that are being vocal and out there. We also have the case of Jose Chacon, and we have another good case of Maribel that we were able to free, and I'm gonna share a video that I'm gonna encourage all of you to check it out. But at the very end, I just wanted to mention some of the demands that we believe at this moment as a collector are important. Is not just the freedom all, not just the close of the detention center, that's in a long run, but release the most vulnerable. I think at this moment it's crucial to work together in all levels to release the most vulnerable. This is still people that are there, detainee, and that can be the next Edwin, and we don't want this in this state. We won the congressional oversight visits on the very minimum, on the weekly basics, and I think it will be great to just alternate and keep that oversight constantly. The restore of the visitations, I think, is crucial at this moment for families. It's being harder and harder to visit their loved ones, and and the finally one is to keep pushing the independent investigation of all deaths in detention in Delaney Hall. I'm gonna leave it out there. I don't want to stand too much, but if you guys have any questions.
Well, I just want to say, all of these demands are quite reasonable. We need an investigation to every death that is associated to Delaney Hall. For folks who are listening, you may not know that very cynically at the end of June, DHS and ICE changed their reporting policies. Previously, if a detainee died within a 30-day window of their release, ICE, DHS had a responsibility to relay that information to the American people. Quite cynically, however, this has changed, and sadly, there are deaths that have occurred that we really don't have full information on. So, Jorge, thank you for your points and sharing this insight. Mayor Collum, I'm going to hand it to you. So, you are the mayor of a suburban town in New Jersey's 11th congressional district. There is no detention center in South Orange, but there is a broad community that both cares about what's happening and is being directly impacted. I want to hand it to you because you've been working overtime to make sure that all of your constituents and residents not only understand what's happening, but you're trying to ensure that there is the health, wellness, and safety of all people in your town are protected. I want to hand it to you, Mayor. Give us some insight on how this issue is unfolding in a place like South Orange, and what interventions or what additional workload have you had to take on to keep people safe?
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. It's an honor to be here. I'm kind of starstruck by the panel here. I am coming here with an open heart, wanting to share some of the best practices and things that I've learned, boots on the ground in a municipality, but I'm also coming here pretty pissed off. So about a week and a half ago, ICE conducted a raid in our community. I don't want to say residents because we treat everybody within our South Orange borders. You don't have to be a resident to be cared about. If you are apprehended in South Orange, we care about you, and we're going to do our best to be able to support you. So I felt like our municipality was well poised. We became a sanctuary city. Throughout the years, we put policies in place. We've done everything that we could, to make our residents feel safe. But the reality is the federal government doesn't care. They're going to do what they're going to do. Even when our governor says you can't wear a face mask, they still show up in face masks. They're on unmarked vehicles. Some of them have license plates that are identical to other license plates. What they're doing to the people that we've seen apprehended is that they get them out on the road. One pulls in front, one pulls in back. They immediately rip them out of their vehicle and then throw them into their vehicle, and then they're off. The unique situation about South Orange and our sister town of Maplewood is that people notice, they care. There's not a situation where somebody is going to get detained or kidnapped in our community without somebody noticing and sharing it. So it was a rapid fire response within, I would say, a matter of minutes, is that neighbors noticed that ICE was in our community. They took pictures, they notified me. I went to social media very quickly, let people know where they were in our community. And I said, send me videos, send me pictures, send me anything that you have. So I'm getting all the information from the residents. Again, this is helpful for people who are doing boots on the ground work or trying to work with your council or your mayor to figure out what does this look like. Our police department reached out to the district office for ICE to figure out who was taken from South Orange, and their response was, you know what, we have activity occurring, we'll confirm that, but you can go look at our database, which will be updated in 24 to 48 hours. But if we don't know who the people are, we don't know who was taken from South Orange. So it was the work of our residents and advocates and people who witnessed what was happening that helped determine who the people were. So within, a very quick time span, we figured out that it was 5 people and then 6 people. We were able to speak to their families. We were able to find people who were translators to talk to their families as well. Volunteers helped set up GoFundMes. Within 72 hours, I was connected with Matt Bloom, who's with Soma Community Cares. That's raised over $300,000 following the hunger strike at Delaney. He put me in touch with Rachel Salazar, who's a DDDI attorney, which I'll come back to very quickly. So once connecting with those individuals in our communities, it just started to roll. It moved very quickly. We were simultaneously working with families, setting up GoFundMe's. Within 72 hours or so, maybe even more, 1,600 people donated close to $130,000 to be assisting these families. Rachel, as a DDDI attorney, went to work so quickly, rock star, filed those habeas petitions, which should be goal number one for anybody who gets detained. I encourage everybody to look it up, but basically the federal government overstepped, detained somebody who shouldn't otherwise not be in custody. So those habeas petitions are critical to make sure that these individuals aren't moved out of state and hopefully not into another jurisdiction that doesn't have the case law and the precedent of like our district in New Jersey. And so I got to speak to all the families. I got to speak to their family members. We were able to share this information online, and it was just a connection, like a full network. And speaking to kind of the things that we do at a municipal level, whether it's resolutions of support or condemnation, is that the reality is we also need municipalities to front some money to really put resources towards helping people. This was the first year that South Orange had put money aside for what we called immigration affairs, which we're now conveying more as a rapid response, realizing the importance of just getting the habeas petitions filed as quickly as possible. Again, you don't have to be a South Orange resident. If you're detained in South Orange, we feel a moral imperative to care about you. And a lot of these residents, with the exception of one, weren't from South Orange, but I think that speaks to the community of care that we have. We also saw that Governor Sherrill obviously increased the amount of money from $8 million to $20 million for the DDDI. And for those of you not familiar, that's the Detention and Deportation Defense Initiative, which is supporting a lot of these groups that are doing the legal work to file these petitions immediately. And I would also say that we've got some really great district court judges that are granting these. I mean, the turnaround of 48 hours to 72-hour releases of people coming back home. Already 3 are back home, with their friends, with their family members. One has a petition that's pending right now. Is that I think that we collectively as municipalities and colleagues and people with a shared interest need to advocate in the New Jersey legislature for that appropriation to be much larger. I think that with the amount of activity that we're seeing and also what's likely going to happen all the way up into the midterms is that I believe that we're going to see a lot more of this activity, whether it's suburban areas, urban areas. And I can't imagine the devastation that this can cause even more families having to live through it with the families locally. And no, these were not criminals. I love that talking point. It's such a throwaway. These were fathers. These were husbands. The one from South Orange is raising a special needs autistic, or rather a child with Down syndrome, goes to work every day. I had another resident who reached out to me and said, when I was detained, I wasn't worried about myself. I was worried about the fact that I had $39 in my bank that would take care of my family. And now he has $27,000 to help him with immigration court and also to make sure that if there's any loss of wages that his family is provided for. This should tear anybody who listens to these stories apart. In theory, when you're looking at it from the outside, it's not happening in your community. You hear things like, oh, they broke the law, it's time to deport them. It becomes very personal when it is in your community and you know these people and they've worked on your homes, especially contractors right now, I think are at great risk because ICE is setting up literally in front of Home Depot, which isn't in our community, but another community. And you could see that activity. So what I would say for advocates and for elected officials is get in the game. The fact that local police are not going to arrest ICE or there's no jurisdiction or we're not going to do anything to impede, federal rules and regulations. We're not cooperating. It's not enough. You have to speak out. You have to get involved. And even if it's just hand-holding with the family to let them know that the mayor, and fortunately in South Orange, our entire city council is fully supportive. We're going to be with you. We're going to help you connect to resources. If you just go to Google and you type in DDDI and attorneys, there's a public-facing form that at a minimum, you just fill it out and you make sure that your loved one or the person that you know that was taken can get representation as quickly as possible. And then, of course, these GoFundMes that pop up, the Give Butters, the people who are close with family members, that $50, $20 compounded by hundreds of people who donate can make a world of difference as that family prepares for immigration court, covering the cost and making sure that, their loved ones get to stay with them. And I'll end by one thing is that today, just again, playing telephone is what happened is that a high school student reached out and confided in his colleague that his father had been detained by ICE. Lo and behold, that student then told his mom. Mom then knew I would be supportive and I tried to figure out a way to help. She reached out to me. I reached out to the superintendent. I wanted to get more information from our police department that is actually very supportive of our efforts and the values of our community to figure out what we had to pull together to try and help this individual. Now, here's where the story changes. Within 30 minutes of me reaching out to the student to contact me, he said his father had been released and that ICE had illegally detained him, that he had his papers. So his family went through that entire nightmare. To what Amol said earlier is indiscriminately, that is absolutely correct. If you fit the profile, they are picking you up. It is unconstitutional. They don't have due process, which is why so many people are being released based on these habeas petitions. And again, a shout out to the DDDI attorneys for doing really sensational work. They're coming from a place of passion and mission. And I think that's why they're working so hard despite the limited resources that they have.
Mayor, thank you so much. You mentioned a few resources that our state and our governor has also put into play. I'm going to rename. You did a great job. The DDDI, which is the Detention Deportation Defense Initiative, that the governor expanded, as you noted. There's also a lawsuit that the governor has instructed the AG to pursue against Geo Group. There are essentially two for-profit companies that run the majority of these detention centers, and frankly, also the majority of for-profit prisons, Geo Group and CoreCivic. Geo Group is the entity that runs Delaney Hall, and CoreCivic runs the Elizabeth Detention Center. Thank you, Mayor, for all that you're doing for not only your residents, but across Essex County, across New Jersey. Hearing from impacted community, they're so grateful that that mayors like you are taking action. I want to hand it to another mayor. Forgive me.
Very quickly, if there's one thing that I missed is that if there are any attorneys or people operating in the private practices, there's also the Rapid Legal Response Initiative that came out from the state of New Jersey, and they are taking volunteers. So it's not even just a matter of money to support DDDI, but if you have a legal background, if you are one of the esquires, please consider volunteering your time because the casework is so large right now that anyone and everyone that meets the criteria that can serve in this capacity could help save a family. Thank you.
Exactly. No, thank you. And we'll make sure when we post this webinar that we're going to include those links to resources as well as the video that Jorge shared. I want to hand it to you, Mayor Frank Velez from Belleville. You've been recently sworn in. You've recently moved into your leadership, but you've been working in Belleville across this community. And I'm certain, similar to Mayor Collum, that you have, there is the impact that these actions have had on Belleville, which has a large immigrant community, are present in mind to you. Do you want to share your insight and what you've learned and what actions you're taking to keep our communities safe? And again, the impact across the board, irrespective of immigration status.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. I am so grateful to be here today. I'm going to try to make sure I get all the important points out. I have a council meeting in about 13 minutes. So here for me in Belleville and what I hear every single day, as you noted, Belleville is a majority Latino community, is also a community where such a large amount of our population is foreign born. And for so many, they've seen what has been going around in the country. They've seen where legal residents have been not only detained, they have been beaten, they have been thrown to the ground, and people are afraid in Belleville. I can tell you, one of my first experiences as a councilman after I was elected in 2024, shortly after the election of Donald Trump, I remember going to a local business in the Silver Lake section of Belleville, right next to Newark, and I walked in and I saw the fear on a business owner's face. She hugged me and she ran to the door and locked the door. And I said, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" And she said, "No, I'm afraid. I'm afraid not only for myself, I'm afraid for my family, I'm afraid for my customers." And she says, every single day she locks that door. Every single day she's peering through the glass. And that stuck with me throughout my time as a councilman and now as a mayor. I've seen full time just the reality that so many people are living with right now, the fear that people feel. And right here in Belleville, recently, we had another ICE situation where early in the morning, there were landscaping crews in two different areas of Belleville where multiple men were detained and where panic ensued, right? People had seen it from the front of their houses, they've seen it on social media, and they were scared, they were afraid. And, you know, for so many, what really hit at them and really what really hit for so many at a personal level was that, again, these are not, you know, the gangbangers, drug busters, you know, these are people who are just trying to make a living for their family, who have been doing that for some time, and who are looking to do what many groups, when coming to America, have work to do, and that's build a better life for them and their families. And we released a statement, and we are in constant contact with State Senator Brittany Timberlake and working alongside her to connect Belleville residents and the township resources at the state level to help residents understand their rights and to ensure that everybody knows that Belleville stands with them, regardless of where they're from, how their journey to this country came, and that we are a community that's accepting of every group. Because at the end of the day, half the battle is respect, and half the battle is recognition, right? Because if you can't even be recognized as an individual, then the conversation can't even proceed. And that is so, so important for myself, my fellow members of the council, as well as our community at large. We are a very accepting community. You know, for going forward, I think that for many residents in Belleville, and I'm sure across the state and across the country, I think what would really benefit municipalities, and I think my colleague in South Orange really spoke this very well, is that connectivity with different partners, different levels of government, and really having that lockstep, not only communication, but coordination with dealing with these cases. And I do want to say, you know, the office of the Congresswoman has been exceptionally responsive. You know, when that situation with the landscapers happened, immediately I reached out to the office, and you know, the Congresswoman, her staff were just so quick to respond. And as a former congressional staffer myself, I know all the things that happen in a federal office on a day to day, and I cannot just say how grateful that not only myself that I am, but the residents are to the service of Congresspeople like Delaney Mejia and everybody who's been on the front lines of this issue. I think going forward as well, I think we need to all do what we can to further advocate at the state level when it comes to curriculum in schools for people to understand their rights and immigration status, because I think that's also an important part of this education. And education starts in the classroom. And it's very important, especially in the climate that we're currently in, that everyone understand what rights that we all have who are living in this country. And I think that's an incredibly important thing. And when you look at communities as diverse as Belleville, I think this issue is more than just a headline, it's personal. You know, people are feeling this every single day. Everybody is worried because they've seen the pictures again, they've seen what's happened. And they know that fear, and it's gotten very, very personal. So I do want to thank the Congresswoman for hosting this seminar, for all of her work, and both in DC and here in the district. I think going forward, again, I think we need to continue to collaborate. We need to continue to work not only at a municipal level, but a county, regional, state, and federal level, and really advocating for everyone who's been affected by just this rampage that we're seeing in towns and cities across this country. So I want to thank the Congresswoman again.
Oh, no, thank you. Honestly, this is a group effort, as we keep saying, as I keep saying. The way in which I am able to best represent the people of New Jersey's 11th is staying connected to its leaders like yourself, like Mayor Collum, like everyone that's listening to this call, to this webinar. And again, the reason I wanted to host this convening, this webinar, was because I heard from so many constituents, folks that aren't part of the new immigrant communities, but who are very concerned about what they're seeing at Delaney Hall. They're concerned about what they're hearing in terms of the encroachment on due process and equal protection, what it means to them as U.S. citizens if our government is able to move the goalpost and play, fast and loose when it comes to our Constitution. I before I hand it to Nedia, I'm sorry, Nedia, if you could please stop. Before I hand it to Nedia, I do want to come back to you, Amol, if you please. Let me hold on. Let me replace this pen. You know, our governor has a role to play. The federal government has a role to play. Advocates, activists have a role to play. The courts have a role to play. Can you give us some insight on like these mechanisms? What should we be holding understanding about? Who has which kind of power in this very complex system that is our immigration system and Delaney Hall?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question, Congresswoman. Look, everybody has a role to play. Every level of government, every individual, every institution, every organization, we all have a role to play. I will flag a couple of things. One is that I think New Jersey, in a lot of ways, at the state level, is leading in this country when it comes to protecting immigrants. We have one of the most diverse states in the country, and we have one of the most fair and welcoming states in the country, and that's a result of advocates and organizers and everyday people pushing our leaders to make sure that we're stepping up in this moment. And so I'm grateful that Governor Sherrill, as you all mentioned, passed a budget that included not doubling, but even more so, almost tripling the allocation for lawyers to serve those that are in detention in New Jersey. I'm grateful that Governor Sherrill has signed laws that would protect immigrants, including codifying legislation that would separate local law enforcement from immigration enforcement. New Jersey has one of the strongest privacy protections for immigrant communities in our state, in our country, and so it's really, really important that we hold all of that and say, like, look, the state is doing a number of different things to ensure that we are creating a welcoming state for everybody, regardless of their immigration status. One thread that I want to pick up on as well is this idea that the Trump administration is going after criminal offenders. And I know I mentioned it earlier, but I just want to say that regardless of who you are, whether you're accused of a crime, whether you're in immigration detention without being accused of a crime, you deserve rights. You have due process rights, and the Constitution cannot be violated for specific groups, right? The Constitution belongs to all of us, and we all have the same rights, regardless of where we were born, whether or not we're embroiled in the criminal legal system, and whether or not we are in immigration detention. And so everybody has those rights. And the last thing I'll mention, everyday people gathered outside of Delaney Hall after the hunger strike had started. Look, everyday people have been gathering outside of Delaney Hall since it opened. But en masse, we saw people protesting outside of Delaney Hall in solidarity with those that were detained inside. They were bringing voice to the conditions that people were experiencing and suffering through inside. And not only are due process violations are happening inside, and equal protection violations and abuse of power happening inside, the First Amendment is being suppressed outside. What we saw when folks were protesting was that they were met with abuse, violence, tear gas, and people being injured at the hands of ICE. We at the ACLU of New Jersey, we're representing Dr. Norma Bowie, who is a nurse who was providing aid to people, including families of people who had loved ones inside, and she was brutalized by ICE. And so we're representing her and suing the federal government and making sure that she gets justice in this moment. But there were so many other stories like hers where people were peacefully exercising their rights to assemble, and they were brutalized by ICE and GEO Group employees and others. And so this goes well beyond what's happening inside the confines of Delaney Hall. It extends to all of our communities and people that want to exercise their constitutional right to peaceably assemble and protest. One of the fundamental rights of this country, and in fact, one of the rights that this country was founded upon. They are unable to do so without being afraid that ICE is going to brutalize them or worse. So we need to stand up for all of our rights, and it takes everyday people and every institution to do so.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to say I saw on the chat, got a private message. Someone asked about whether or not Delaney and the Elizabeth Detention Center had equally egregious conditions. I can report that both of them have similar conditions, but they have different problems in some respects. Delaney, because of its size, because of not only the size of the location, the number of detainees, has a different set of issues, whether it's waking up detainees at 4 a.m. to go take a first turn at breakfast because there's too many detainees in order to eat at regular hours in their cafeteria. Both have medical centers, and both I've heard from and witnessed individuals complaining that they haven't been or weren't receiving adequate medical attention. In fact, at the Elizabeth Detention Center was where I first became clear that this problem of the medically vulnerable not getting their medication in a timely way was in fact occurring. And things that I witnessed at the Elizabeth Detention very clearly became evident across both systems once I knew what questions to ask. And speaking about what questions to ask and how to better understand your rights, how to know where you could access information and how you could protect yourself, your family. And again, this is for everyone, irrespective of immigration status, to understand. I want to bring in the executive director of Make the Road New Jersey, which is a grassroots organization I've worked with for many, many years, defending and engaging immigrant communities, diverse communities across New Jersey's 11th, across New Jersey, really. At Nedia Morsy, I want to hand it to you to really help us understand what are the rights that everyday people should be able to not only know, but be able to share across community, and what actions can we take across organizations like Make the Road and those that you work with, as Jorge mentioned.
For sure. Thanks, Congresswoman, and thanks everyone so much for taking time to join tonight's call. My name is Nedia, and I'm the director of Make the Road. We are a member-led organization that centers immigrants as strategists to deliver real material change in their lives and that of their communities. Just like the Congresswoman said, we have a collective responsibility to not only know our rights, share our rights, but to make sure that we are keeping the story of detention alive and well. I want to share a story of a member of ours who is currently detained at Delaney. Carlos has been detained, was targeted at a bus stop in Elizabeth about 3 months ago. He entered Elizabeth Delaney Hall with fatty liver disease. It's been 3 months, and today he bleeds consistently out of his nose and his mouth. He has not received adequate medical care. And to Jorge's point earlier, these are instances that at one point were preventable, and as more and more time passes, becomes deadly and fatal. Now, the work that the Congresswoman is talking about is what are we doing to, one, make sure that we as individual people are creating spaces where folks are emboldened to share their rights with each other, and also what are we doing in order to encourage members of elected government at all levels to lean into their power and protect immigrant communities. So, we don't have the space to sort of go through an entire Know Your Rights training, but it is important that we all know that we have access to constitutional rights, the right to remain silent, the right to representation, and the right to not give consent to an unlawful search. I do want to talk about, how we're moving levels of government. So at the local level, we have the opportunity to strengthen the Immigrant Trust Act. Many folks may have seen at the beginning of the year, we were able to move an immigrant protections package, and still cities can go so much further to make sure that there is no collaboration between local law enforcement and the police. Beyond that, we know that there are serious economic consequences to detention. Many people, like the mayor just spoke about, are struggling to afford legal fees in a moment when they were already dealing with skyrocketing costs. And so it's a moment where cities can lean in, provide rent control, provide right to counsel, make sure that we are keeping people in the homes after the Trump administration has worked so hard to separate families. At the state level, we must stop investing in Palantir. Folks may be familiar, but Palantir is the top ICE contractor. It is what allows ICE to conduct foot patrol so successfully. Palantir calls massive data sets together from private and public profiles that allows them to get a near time perfect assessment of where people are when. As a result, you are seeing increased raids and more frequent activity because the technological apparatus is so powerful and so strong. As a result of the bravery of the more than 300 hunger and labor strikers, the state about 2 months ago was able to more than double funding into the DDDI program at $20.2 million. The state of New Jersey currently invests $138 million into Palantir stock. And so while we are providing resources to protect people who are detained, we are simultaneously paying more than 300% into detaining people. There are, I'll share shortly a report in the chat that folks can read more about how the state of New Jersey is complicit in the surveillance system as it currently exists. And then, of course, at the federal level, like Jorge mentioned, we can be conducting, congressional oversight. It is ICE lies, and it is fascist to take them for their word. And so we have a responsibility to conduct oversight, to sign on to bills like the MELT Act and the updated registry, and to make sure that we have that companies, big companies like Palantir, have no business on our elections and have no business influencing our members of Congress, who instead have this responsibility to making sure that we are keeping people safe, and not skyrocketing their costs and not allowing taxpayers to have to pay money for electric shock gloves. I'm going to share my screen just so folks can get access to that little CIS report, and then also stay connected with Make the Road. We are, just like the Congresswoman said, frequently doing Know Your Rights trainings, and then also sharing advisories as it relates to TPS and DACA. Thank you so much for the time, and I'm going to pass it back to the Congresswoman.
Thank you. As you share that QR code, I have, while you put that out and folks want to to scan and find out more. We have a couple questions. I want to see if I could get some folks to answer. Jorge, folks on the call wanted to understand how they could learn more about what lawyers are scamming communities. Is there a place in which the names of these disreputable lawyers or firms are being shared that we can make sure folks see? Is there a link in which people could find out more, or a way in which they could connect with Endelan or the groups to make sure that they are better informed?
I'm just sharing our website as well. Is eyesoutofnewjersey.org. I'm sharing the link. Just gonna make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you all have it. So there we have a form that you can fill it up, and then we are following up with all this list of scam cases that we have.
Thank you. Thank you. And then, Amol, I want to ask you, folks were curious, although it's outside of the district, it still has impact across New Jersey's 11th. A lot of New Jersey 11th constituents, voters, advocates were actually at Roxbury pushing against the designation of that warehouse facility as a detention center. In fact, I met with recently, just a few days ago, I met the mayor who had shared that their biggest concern was zoning, was the fact that the facility was not equipped for the number of people, the impact that it would have on the quality of life for those in the surrounding residential community. But could you give us a little bit of an update of what's going on there?
Totally. So look, this is another place where the state and municipalities deserve some credit. The state, under Governor Sherrill's leadership and the Attorney General's leadership, actually sued the federal government to stop the Roxbury facility from moving forward. And so they were engaged in litigation. And it was a lawsuit that was a partnership between the state and the locality of Roxbury. And it was a bipartisan lawsuit. I think that deserves mentioning, right? The locality, the municipality is run by a Republican town council, and they partnered with our Democratic governor to sue. And that goes to show you how unwanted this facility is and how inhabitable it would be for the people that would potentially be detained there. And so they ended up in an agreement where the Trump administration actually backed off from the lawsuit, right? From the facility plans. And they actually said that they weren't going to go forward with the facility until after an environmental assessment to determine whether or not it should be built or converted. And then later, several weeks later, the Trump administration reneged and said that they were actually going to go forward with the facility, even though they told a court something the exact opposite. And so we have yet to see what actually is going to happen as a result of all of this. But I'm grateful that our state, our attorney general, and the town of Roxbury have all stepped up and fought back, and it wouldn't have happened. Again, I can't reiterate this or underscore this enough. It would not have happened unless the community members in Roxbury and people all around the state that spoke out against that facility stepped up. And we saw community members speak out, call their local council members, and call the mayor and call the attorney general's office and the governor's office and ensure that they were doing whatever they could to push back. Lawmakers, as you know, Congresswoman, lawmakers listen to their communities. They listen to their constituencies, and they are persuaded by what it is that their constituencies want. And so that's why it's all the more important that we continue to speak out on against every injustice that we see.
Thank you. I want to thank you. I know that there are questions that folks still have. We're going to be looking for, I hear you loud and clear, Marlene. There are resources that we are looking for behind the scenes, in particular to serve the Creole, the Haitian community, to make sure that language access information is also shared. When we post this, we will also make sure to link many of the resources that you heard on this call tonight. But I want to close close by just thanking each and every one of my panelists for coming on tonight to give us some insight. Knowledge is power. In order for our government to function well, you need to be an informed consumer, an informed voter, an informed constituent. And I take my role very seriously in ensuring that you have access to the kind of information that helps you make better decisions. We wanted to make sure that you had an insight onto what is the legal, the human, the municipal impact of what is unfolding in these detention centers and why everyday Americans, irrespective of their immigration status, should be concerned if our government is stripping away constitutional protections that are afforded to everyone who has their feet on U.S. soil. Again, I want to thank both Mayor Collum and Frank Velez for giving us insight onto how these issues are unfolding and impacting their local communities. I want to thank Jorge and Nedia for sharing the insight of how this impacts immigrants across New Jersey and what actions we can take together as cohesive society. And finally, I want to thank my good friend and advocate, Amol Sinha, for just the tenacity and the brilliance in helping us understand very clearly what's at stake here. To everyone that stayed tuned in and everyone listening after the fact, I thank you for your commitment to good governance. I stand right there with you. I want to say good night and have everyone have a great evening.